Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to film my ranking video for the Booktube Prize Semifinals round in 2021. So I was judging Nonfiction Group A, and I ended up having 3 books that I had not yet read in that round of 6 books. And yeah, I'm going to quickly go through my ranking for these books. And because I have already talked about some of the books in previous rounds, I won't talk about those ones as much, and I'll talk about the ones that are new to me more. So I'm going to go through these in order of my preference, from 6, which was my least favorite, to 1, which was my most favorite. And of course, the top 3 are the ones that I voted to have go through to the next round. And I will say, these are all, I've said this before in the other 2 rounds, but even more so now that we're into the end of the Booktube Prize judging. These books are all great books. They're excellent books in their own right. But I have to rank them. I will tell you too up front that 4 of the 6 were 5-star reads for me, so only 3 could go through on my top 3. So, that meant I had to leave a 5-star book off the list. So you can see just from that these are really excellent books. So let's just get into it. In my number 6 position, not moving from the last round when I had it in number 6 position as well, The Dead Are Rising by Les Payne and Tamara Payne. So this is the biography of Malcolm X, and it is extremely detailed. And for me, the place where it fell down was that I felt it was lacking in the personal, his personal thoughts, feelings, whatever. I mean, I understand there's another book, The Autobiography of Malcolm X, which was written by Malcolm X, which I should probably read in order to get that. But I really felt like the context was missing for me around a lot of his actions, why he did certain things that he did, what his feelings were about those actions, and some very big, what I would say, character flaws are sort of left not discussed as thoroughly as I would personally like to see them discussed. And also, a large section of the book goes into the Nation of Islam and all of the political stuff around that organization. And that was dry to me, and I didn't like it, as well as sort of the personal history of Malcolm X. So that was in 6th place for me. Again, not a bad book, just not my favorite. Now, in 5th place for me this time was Our Bodies, Their Battlefields by Christina Lamb. And this is a book which Christina Lamb, who is a journalist and has been a journalist for decades, details how rape is used as a weapon of war against women all over the world. And when she says women, she means women of all ages, from infant children all the way to 80 and 90-year-old grandmas. And it is highly detailed and very exacting. I appreciated the work that went into this nonfiction. I appreciated all of the reporting that Christina Lamb has done on this topic. I think it's an incredibly important topic. It is, however, a very harrowing, intense, stomach-churning book to try to read. I listened to it on audiobook, and I had to listen to it in small chunks and take breaks because it was just so horrifying. And just when you think it can't get any more horrifying, it does get more horrifying, which is not to say that we shouldn't read this book. We should, but it's just so difficult. And I just found it maybe a little bit too detailed, but the information is very important, and I think necessary for us to understand what is happening, what has happened in the past, and what continues to happen in the present day, in terms of how women are brutalized in the name of war or political movements. And Christina Lamb also talks about how legal frameworks have been developed around rape as a weapon of war, so that international law has developed over time, because rape was not anything that anybody was ever held to account for in a court of law before about 20 or 30 years ago. So it's really a fairly new phenomenon in sort of the history of law, worldwide, and it continues to develop, and she's sort of detailing that development. But it was really incredibly difficult to read. I do appreciate also the global nature of this book because she details things that have happened in countries all over the world, in almost every continent, I believe. So it's just truly a truly hard book, but important one. And because I felt it did go a little bit overly detailed at times, and because it was so incredibly emotionally difficult to read, it was in position number 5 for me. Then in 4th place is a book that I've had in my round every single time, and it finally fell down to 4th place for me. This is the address book, What Street Addresses Reveal About Identity, Race, Wealth, and Power by Deirdre Mask. And this book is really great. I've talked about it before. I've sung its praises. I'll look at how our physical addresses, how have they been created. Again, this book has a global perspective. It goes to many places around the world and talks about physical addresses, how they were initially instigated, what the importance of them is and continues to be, how physical addresses are used to either help or hinder people depending on their social class or their racial demography. So yeah, it's an excellent book. I just really enjoyed reading about all these different places. I appreciated the tone Deirdre Mask uses in her writing. She approaches this with a very light touch, and so it made it very easy to read, and very entertaining, while also, dealing with also some difficult issues, but not ever, I never felt like it was too much. It's definitely a more popular style of book. So I very much love this book, 5-star book for me, but unfortunately, this category, this group of books was so strong, it ends up in position number 4 for me. Then for my top 3, so these are the 3 books that I judged as the best books in my group for this particular round. So in number 3, I have Notes on a Silencing by Lacey Crawford. This is a memoir where Lacey Crawford talks about her experience being sexually assaulted in her high school boarding school in a very elite New England prep school. And Lacey Crawford and I are similar age, very similar age. I think she was only 1 or 2 years behind me in terms of schooling. Northeast, I'm from the Northeast in the United States as well. So there's a lot there that I sort of connected with and understood in terms of the culture and what she was discussing in terms of, I didn't go to boarding school, I went to public school, so I didn't have that, experience, but I felt there was a lot relatable, and also the time period that she's talking about was very relatable to me. And what ended up propelling this book into the 3rd position for me was, at first, I'm like, okay, it's another memoir of a young woman who gets sexually assaulted. Nobody is held to account for it. The powers that be do not hold the young men accountable. And in fact, those young men then go on in life to be, very important people, quote unquote. And that is what made this book more than just another accounting of a woman's assault. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but what elevated this book for me was this discussion about how the systems that are in place in our culture are designed to protect and promote certain people. And those people are white, privileged, male people. And it doesn't seem to matter what these guys get up to, if they're of a certain economic class, if they're of a certain race, if they're of a certain background in terms of family network, they can pretty much get away with anything. And this is what Lacey Crawford is detailing. And what was even more disgusting than what the individual perpetrators got away with was what the school did to protect them. And in fact, they didn't just protect the perpetrators, they actively went on the attack for this young woman, this teenage girl, who was 15 when this happened to her. And they actively went on the attack to discredit her, to tell lies about her, to make her feel less than, to sully her reputation in the eyes of the school community and in the broader world. I mean, because this goes on for years and years and years. And it was just horrifying to read about. Like, Lacey Crawford really does a wonderful job, I think, writing. And in very similarly to Know My Name by Chanel Miller last year, this book just is so raw and so real. And Lacey Crawford writes it with such honesty and straightforwardness that it just elevated it again for me into this number 3 place. I did not expect to like this book as much as I did. It was, again, another book that I had to keep taking breaks because I got so upset while I was reading it, and I just felt like it really is detailing something that happens in our culture, in our society. I'm speaking now of the United States, but I'm sure it happens in a lot of countries, of how a system oppresses women and elevates men, especially in white men. And it just is very disturbing. Very excellent book. And then in second place, another book I did not expect to like as much as I did is The Dragons, the Giant, and the Women by Weatu Moore. Now, I had read Weatu Moore's fiction book, which I'm completely blanking on at the moment. And this is her memoir about growing up in Liberia and during the revolution or the Civil War that breaks out there, and what happens to her. So I listened to this on audiobook. It was fabulous on audiobook. I would highly recommend that you consume this book in this way if you have access to it and you like audiobooks, because it is just so wonderfully narrated. It's amazing. So this book is divided into 3 sections. And the first section is told from the perspective of Weatu when she's a young child, like 4 or 5 years old, like very young child. And Civil War comes to her country. And she's sort of like, of course, she's oblivious to the political issues that surround this uprising. And so she's having to flee her home with her father and other members of her family. Her mother is overseas going to school in America, and so she's just with her dad and these other members of her household. And because she's so young, she's telling the story as if the soldiers that are trying to kill them, or all of the things, the negative things that they encounter in their flight from their home to try to get to safe haven, are fantastical creatures from Liberian myth. And you would not think that would be successful, but because she's telling it from such a person of such a young age's perspective, it totally makes sense that she would frame what she's experiencing with the myths and the stories that she's been told as a young girl, because she has no other way to contextualize what's happening to her. It was amazing. And sure, the second part is what Weatu experiences once she safely reaches America, and she grows up, her childhood and her young adulthood growing up as American, but also having this traumatic experience behind her family sort of trying to adjust as immigrants to American way of life. And that part was excellent as well. Really enjoyed that sort of immigrant experience and the trauma of trying to integrate into just like a regular everyday life and going to school and all of that. And then the third section is Weatu's mom's story. So what happened to her while she's in America? Her family is fleeing war, and she has lost touch with them. Like they can't call each other, like everything, all the systems in Liberia have been basically destroyed, right? There's no way for anybody to talk to one another. And so the mom doesn't really know where her family is, her husband and her children. And so she doesn't know. And so the trauma, like she's trying to complete her schooling while still like trying to desperately reach out to any way she can. And she ends up going back to Liberia to try to rescue her family, if she can find them. And it was such a thrilling story. It was like reading a political thriller or something instead of somebody's memoir. It was amazing. So very, very excellent. Really, really enjoyed it. Loved the structure. Loved the audiobook. 5-star read for me. That was in second place. And then first place, which probably is no surprise to anyone who's heard me talk about this book, is Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. I read her first book, The Warmth of Other Suns, a couple years ago. Loved it. Read this one as soon as it came out last year, and I just think it's brilliant. I think Isabel Wilkerson writes about race and racial hierarchy in our culture so amazingly well. In this book, she's not only detailing the caste system that exists in America, although we don't name it as such, it certainly exists, but she's also comparing what's going on in America with what happened during the Nazi regime in Germany under Hitler, and also with India's caste system. And I just thought it's such a brilliant framework to discuss racial disparity and what people are, how people are held back and held down and oppressed in different societies under different terminology, but really very, very similar. Very similar tools are used to keep certain groups of people in their place, which is below the privileged class, which in America, of course, is the white class. So brilliant. You can see from all the tabs that still are in my book how much I got out of this. I just feel like you could tab or highlight something on every page. Brilliant, should be required reading for everybody in the United States, at least, if not around the world. I love this book. So there was no question for me. It was going to have to be a tough go for any of the books in this group to knock Caste out of the #1 position for me. And in the end, it maintained its position at the top of the heap. Again, a 5-star book for me. Loved it. Really, really hoping this wins it all, to be honest with you. So that's where we're at with the semifinal round for the Booktube Prize. I will be judging the final round for nonfiction for the Booktube Prize. So for the next 2 months, I will be reading the 6 books that made it through, which Caste did make it through. So I will be reading this. My other 2 picks, my 2 and 3 picks, did not make it through. So I was not going along with the crowd in my favorites out of this bunch. And then from the other bunch, there are 3 books that I have not yet read. So I have 3 books that I need to read for this round, the current round, and I am looking forward to experiencing those books and seeing what they have in store and seeing if anything I read this year can bump Caste from the top position. Thank you all for watching. I hope you've found some good, I hope you have been finding some good books to read, and I will talk to you later.